Hemshech Hayim Beis, Volume 1, and we're hopefully coming to the conclusion of a marathon chapter in a marathon Hemshech called Hayim Beis. The chapter is Kufnun Ches, which is 158, which began on page 312 and concludes on page 316. So what is the theme of this chapter? Amidst the theme of the entire flow of Hayim Beis, the theme is Kav Hamida. We call it two words, Kav Hamida. The line, the measurement line. The line that measures. It is essentially the channel that is used by the divine energy to channel, regulate the flow, commensurate and proportion to each particular level and entity within the cosmic order. And should the flow not be regulated, and the Eira Kesser, as he puts it, the Atzilus of the Sfiris, the emanation of the Sfiris, not be regulated by this Kav Hamida, what we would have is an overflow. You'd have Kesser going Ein Sof, and not allowing Chochmah to emerge. And he explained that both in the sphere level, in the faculties of the soul level, and in Aveda, in service. And briefly, Kesser is an enormous power. Chochmah is a different dimension. Chochmah, for its unique identity to emerge, you can't have Kesser dominating and overwhelming. In the faculties of the person, Kesser is Ratzon. So a person that's about Ritzenis, as he puts it, very strong-willed, and his will is dominant. His will is now in full glory, revealed in full intensity. Seichel does not speak to a person like that. And Naveda, it's Ru'usa Deliba, the desire, Ru'usa, the Ratzon, Kesser, the Ratzon of the heart, that when it's ablaze, Seichel is, not part of it. L'shayach linyan sichli, as he says. Even if Seichel leads to that dimension, and he took the whole length of different levels of Ru'usa Deliba, but once you reach it, even if contemplation, his bananus, and asaga, and comprehension lead you there, but once the excitement is there, once you're already excited, you're taken by the excitement, Seichel is no longer a factor. And that's from Kesser to Chochmah, meaning from Ratzon to wisdom. Same thing is from wisdom, from Seichel to Midas. Same thing. When Seichel is at its full intensity, there's no room for another. There's no room for a feeling, for a subjective feeling. You're immersed in the subject. For a feeling to emerge requires a step away from the intelligence. Even if the midas and the feelings are informed by the intelligence, but it's a step away. Same thing, Chochmah to Bina, which we discussed at length in the last class. Chochmah and Bina. Chochmah is the spark, the point. When it's in its full intensity, Bina cannot emerge. And he explained at length why, because Chochmah is not just the beginning of understanding. Chochmah has a unique qualitative level called Riyah. It's like the vision of an idea. There's a clarity there. And even in the world of Seichel, Chochmah, as it comes into comprehension, it's also the Hanocha Seichlis, which is the conviction, the intellectual conviction. That is not there. That, when it's full glory, when it's full intensity, Bina, which is really breaking down the details, has to have some space. So it has to have some of the Chochmah has to be somewhat concealed. Even though Chochmah informs Bina, and even though it makes your comprehension far deeper, but the bottom line is, it's only when Chochmah gets concealed that Bina can really do its job of fleshing out the details of an idea. And only a part of Chochmah, only as he calls Efes Katseu, like same thing with Ratzon, same thing with Meichen and Midas, intelligence and feeling, same thing with desire and intelligence, same thing is from Chochmah and Bina, only a small dimension, Efes Katseu, a small edge, remains, in order for the lower faculty to be able to emerge. And then he concludes, and the same thing is with the spheres. This is the example from the faculties. Remember, our faculties, as he's constantly going through Hayim Beis, is really a model for essentially an evolutionary evolved from the 10 spheres, like he says in Tanya, Nishtal Shlumehen, that the spheres, that the Kreiches HaNefesh, the 10 faculties of human being, evolved from the 10 spheres. So the same thing is with the spheres. Going back to the spheres, I'm reading at the bottom of page 316 that when a higher sphere, a higher energy, a higher dimension is radiating begili in a full revealed way, the emanation of a lower sphere it doesn't allow for the emanation of a lower sphere. And for there to be emanation, you need to have the concealment of the higher sphere. And that's the Kav Hamida. So I'm going to continue from right here. V'zein Kav Hamida, shu is hagbola lahagbil, his pashtus hasfiras b'deshiyah atzilus hasfiras acheres. So the Kav Hamida is this channel, the stylus, this paintbrush, the line that measures Kav, that defines. Through Hagbola that defines Hagbola, that is the definition or the confinement. To confine the Hagbola is to confine the extension and expansion of the sphere. So that in order to allow to allow for the emanation of another sphere, of another sphere, that is. So this piece goes very much hand in hand to what we discussed much earlier. I believe it's chapter 58 or something around that. Let me just see something. We spoke about in spheres, besides the three interpretations of sphera being number, story, and illumination, and what we call transparence. We spoke, I believe, let me just see, even earlier maybe. Yeah, probably earlier. There was a piece where we spoke about a Zohar. Give me a second. I believe it's. Well, anyway, there was a whole piece where he spoke about how Milo Mata, how the hierarchy is created in the cosmic order. So, yeah, I was talking about chapter 44. Where he talks about the Zohar Parsha Pinchas, the Chol Sfira Isla Shem Yediyah Umida V'Gvul V'Tchum. So he spoke about the different elements and spheres that about their constructure, and then later he speaks about how the distinction between one sphere and another is really fundamentally different because each sphere has its own personality. So I would say learning what we're learning now at the end of chapter 158 goes hand in hand with that discussion of structure. Even though now he's coming obviously to it more of how that structure is going to be elevated, and there he was just laying out the structure, but remember it's one big map here. So what defines the structure? We say the Kav Hamida. That's what he's saying here. V'zeu Tam, and we'll start from here, which is where we left off. So that's Kav Hamida. Clear? It is the tool, the method that God uses to shape and create, like an artist would use a stylus or a brush to actually paint the particular colors and shapes and forms and so on. Like a pen, it's a flow. So it's it measures Kav Hamida and allows that flow to go through. And just to qualify, obviously we're not talking now how God envisions. Some places it says the Kav Hamida, the root of it, is the Shir Atzmei B'Kayach, when God envisioned the structure. Like in the Eiros, the Sheirish of the Eiros, and the 10 hidden spheres, in the Eir HaBligvul, the infinite possibilities, the artist envisioned a particular image. So that is obviously going to be the root of ultimately the Kav Hamida. But the Kav Hamida is the actual application of that. It's not just the theoretical concept as it sits in the world of Eir. That would be something that's before the Tzimtzum and doesn't yet manifest. Here we're talking about the actual process of the manifestation of the structure. So as I've given the example, the artist, as he envisions the art, is not the paintbrush when he's actually painting the art. We're talking here the paintbrush, the stylus, the tool, the instrument used.
The Kav Hamida doesn't give quality, it just gives, so to speak, quantity.
Everything, quality and quantity. I discussed at length earlier. The Kav Hamida carries the energy. It's quality and quantity. He spoke there at length that it's not just quantity in the sense where Chachma, Bina is less quantity than Chachma, it's also the fundamental Mahus, identity of Chachma is different. Here he's not talking so much about the identity. Here he's just discussing the intensity of one level needs to be regulated. He's not even getting into, here it's both. I think here it's quantity and quality. Yeah, for sure, because it's just the intensity of, let's say, of desire doesn't allow for intelligence to emerge. You won't have a structure. Okay, now he continues. V'zeu hatama shebishtalshus hasfiris kol ma shenishtalshu madrega lemadrega mizgala b'chinas hadin v'hagvuri yeser. And this is the reason why in the shtalshus hasfiris, in the evolution, in the hierarchy of the spheres, which are essentially the building blocks, the colors and hues, as I said, that shape existence, the building blocks, the DNA. So the more it evolves lower, the lower it goes from level to level, the more is revealed this dimension of dinin v'gvuri yeser, the dimension of you can say justice. I don't say justice actually. The dimension of rule of order, which is called discipline. You can say, and gvura. What did I use before that? The gvura is a measurer because gvura is discernment. It distinguishes. Chesed is a flow. Gvura is a regulator. Gvura says, no, this one deserves this one does not deserve. Gvura is a judge. So what does a judge do? A judge looks for justice. It looks for what is right, what is the correct measure exactly of the flow. So the more lower, the more it goes down, the more the din and gvurim are revealed. And gvuris are revealed. Shari b'keser, shari ha-keser, hu b'chinas rachmim pshutim. Keser, which is the highest, is rachmim pshutim. It's simple and plain and compassion. V'chochma isa b'chayit, and about chochma chayit is a kabbalistic work in the Middle Ages, before the Arizal even. Sheyesh b'ktzaz din. The chayit is then chochma is already ktzaz din. Chayit is a sefer hachayit. Yehuda Chayit. He was a big kabbalist in the Middle Ages. I think 12th century maybe.
Chayit is a tailor.
Maybe that's why he's called. Yeah, but he was called Yehuda Chayit.
And he lived in Europe?
I think Italy.
Italy?
It's before that Arizal. Yehuda Chayit, I'm almost sure Italy, but there's also this. Chayit is brought very often when you talk about, Chassidus brings about the opinions of the spheres. You ever hear of a sefer called Mareches Alakus? Sefer Mareches? Chayit, I think, is a commentary on that sefer. There's a sefer Mareches Alakus, there's a sefer, what's the one I wanted to bring? Chayit? Pirush HaChayit. Mareches Alakus.
Does that mean Keser, Chinas, Rachamim?
Pshutim. Keser, the level of Keser, the highest is pure, is simple Rachamim.
How do you explain that?
It's just a flow of compassion. It's like the 13 attributes of compassion. It's a flow of divine compassion. Of divine compassion. Rachamim, compassion.
No, that's a mixture of Chesed and Gevurah, right?
No, he doesn't say anything. He just calls it Rachamim. You ever hear of the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim? You ever hear of the 13 attributes of compassion? That's a separate dimension. They don't talk about it. It's not Chesed, not Gevurah. It's compassion. It's an infinite. It's an unlimited.
It doesn't seem to flow from everything from before. I still don't understand that, but it's okay.
He's introducing a new idea.
Completely new idea.
He's saying, based on what we've learned before, that you need to have basically the kav hamida to measure, because if one sphere continues to flow, it will not allow the next sphere. We'll understand why from each level, new din, the dinim. This is a new concept. Each level, din and gvura get stronger. And he's explaining now. Keser is pure compassion. There's no din, no gvura. There's actually expression less smeila b'hayatika. There's no left side in atik. He doesn't mention that here. In chochma, he says from the chayit, yesh b'ktzaz din. Chochma has already a little discernment, a certain element of din. Din is not a bad thing. Din is basically judgment. When you say God goes from midas hara, he sits on kisei rachamim to kisei hadin. It's like Rosh Hashanah. It's when you allocate. Din is when there's an accountability given, and things have to be measured exactly. Keser is a revelation level, and Chochmah is really the beginning of Ksazdin. Ubina, Bina is the beginning of Gvura. Gvura is the beginning of Chesed. Chesed is the beginning of Gvura. Gvura is the beginning of Chochmah. Chesed is the beginning of Keser. Chesed is the beginning of Bina. Bina is the beginning of Chochmah. Chesed is the beginning of Ksazdin. Ubina Minot din and mesadin. And in Bina, from her, emerge and flow dinin. Bina is the beginning where all Gvuras come from. Lakshazo, the Seifa. B'bchinas chitzeni sabina. So dinin flow from Bina, but it's from the end of Bina. The end of the lower dimension, from its lowest, from the outer dimension of Bina. Ubezo yesh chesed Gvura. And in Zoh you actually have the full-blown chesed and Gvura, a sphere called Gvura. So we see from here that Gvura gets stronger as we go downward. In Keser is Rachmim Pshutim. In Chacham is Ksazdin. In Bina begins the source of Dina, but only Chetzeni is Bina. And the real Gvura, where Gvura really emerges, is in the Midas, in Zoh. So you have...
That's where you have a structure.
A structured Gvura. But the question, like in other words, we're trying to say is, where does Gvura begin? So of course it begins, it's one of the spheres in the 10 hidden spheres. But we're talking about in the process, where does it begin? So he's explaining now in the process, it doesn't emerge right away. Because Gvura is going to be the concept of limitation. He's explaining it now. Since limitation is great, has gradations, so the lower you go, the more Gvura, the more powerful the Gvura is. Because Gvura is limiting. It's like, think of it this way. If you have a very, very strong flow of energy, or water for that matter, and you need to limit it. Okay, so you put some blocks, you put a little Gvura here to limit the flow, but it hasn't really stopped it completely. So it's good enough for Chochmah to emerge. Now you got to get it to Bina, you need another block, so you need more Gvura. You ever see like many, we have it even in the human body. You have many so-called filters, many regulators, because one regulator is not enough to slow it down completely. Like for example, when a plane lands, or when a spaceship returns. There's parachutes and there's brakes. There's 100 things. There's the wind resistance. There's a lot of steps to slow something down. And if you want to get it to, so in other words, the less the revelation, the more stops you need. So that's why Gvura, essentially, there's one level of brakes that slow it down between Keser and Chochmah. There's the next level to Bina, then to Gvura. That's what he's basically saying.
It's two dimensions we're talking about of each of them. This chesed and Gvura, as we know.
So that's what he's introducing now.
And then in the structure itself, this chesed is pushing it down, and Gvura is measuring and holding it back. So that's why it's a little confusing, because there's two different types within this whole thing we're talking about.
Okay. And the primary distinction, the primary diversity is in Zoh, to the level of Gvura.
He means mainly the spheres after Gvura?
Ischalkus. The main, till there's no real, the real distinction happens in Zoh, where the Gvura dominates. Like in the mind, we've learned that in the mind you can give an idea that Shammai and Hillel both can get Chesed and Gvura. So the mind can include them both together. Same idea can go both ways, even though subtly it's there.
Right.
But the real distinction comes in the halacha, when Shammai says no, you're not allowed. Hillel says yes. So the root of it all begins in much subtler levels. No one's suggesting otherwise. But we're talking about where's the full-blown manifestation of distinction? That this is measured this way. Like remember, we learned even before about Esses Sfiras Hagnuzos, for example, in a seed, or in a root of something, it may have a seed of a tree is going to have all the branch, everything is going to emerge from there. But in that state, they all can reside side by side. But then it begins to emerge. Then he goes on. Or Malchus, ikir binyano hu ma'agvurus. Now he goes lower than Zoh. And Malchus, its primary structure is from Gvurus. That's what it says in many places. Yeah. Keneda, as it's known. Bezeu, now what's the reasoning? So what's the reason for this so-called intensification and growth of Gvura's power as we go downward? That's because the emanation of the spheres is according to the Maimer Kavamida, meaning the utterance. Maimer means the declaration, more than declaration, the order. The order that God orders, the Kavamida, the line of measurement. This kavamid is what? Is Akbala, is a confined state in order to confine things, to limit the flow. Al Kaimim, Madregel is Gala Gvura, B'Yeser. And that's why, because Atzilus spheres are done through a Kav HaMidah that is regulating the flow and diminishing it, therefore from level to level is revealed even more, a more increasing growth of Gvura, is more increasingly revealed Gvura. Okay, that's Kav HaMidah. Now he's going back to the beginning of the chapter. So he's now going back. So we established, what we established, if you remember the beginning of the chapter, we have a question on the table. The question is this: how could we say that the Avos, patriarchs, and Matan Torah for sure, drew down an energy that's higher, the Shalayal Pi Kav HaMidah, not according to this order of the regulator of the flow, when everything in existence comes through Kav HaMidah, as he made the whole case. Even Torah, mitzvahs, even Elikus, even Makifim. The only way they enter this existence is through one channel. There's no other channel to get here. There's no back door of Bli Gvul. It's all coming through this. So he's trying to understand what is this pipe, this channel. So he began by saying, I want to refresh ourselves, that's true. However, in Kav HaMidah there are levels. And he made primarily two levels from Yecheskel. Kav HaMidah, the Knei HaMidah. Introduced another. Kav HaMidah is the line that measures. Knei HaMidah is a stick, is a rod. You can call it a measuring rod, as opposed to like more of a solid ruler. So he explained, this is also halachic issues involved, but from the pasuk that he saw the vision of Gavriel of a man, Yecheskel did. His image was copper, and in his hand he had two measurers, Pishton biyodei, psil pshishton, a string or thread of flax, which is essentially Kav HaMidah, and Knei HaMidah. He also had a stick. Think of it like a bamboo or a rod. And the difference between them is one measures things that are harder to measure, like earth. This was all to measure the Beis HaMikdash. One measures things like earth, where you need a string to be very flexible because the earth is not straight. When you need to measure something like stones or wood, which is very solid, a flat ruler or a flat stick is more appropriate. So he said that these are two ways to measure, and he said in Zohar it says Zimnin, sometimes you have a Kav HaMidah, sometimes Knei HaMidah. That's the Psil and Knei. What's the difference? He says one is Kav HaMidah is Gvura, and Knei HaMidah is Chesed. And he explained it like this: Kav HaMidah being that it's a Psil, the Kav HaMidah being that it is Pishtan. Where does Pishtan grow? Flax grows in the earth. The earth is dry, and the earth is connected to Gvul, to Gvura. So the earth is, and that's why flax also grows like linen, bad bebad, individuals. It's very clear distinctions how it grows. On the other hand, Knei HaMidah, so akana grows on the water. B'yam suf. It's primary, and water is chesed, as opposed to offer. Knei HaMidah chesed. So then he went on to explain the Kav HaMidah. Now he's coming back, so what do we know from the Kav HaMidah? It's Gvura. And we just established that the Gvura grows as it goes, because the Kav HaMidah's primary role is measurement, is regulation, is limitation, is restraint, is all that I've described, tempering, channeling, etc. Now it comes back to Kav HaMidah, to Knei HaMidah, So now we go like this. Knei HaMidah, this was Kav HaMidah. Knei HaMidah, the rod that measures. Shugam Ken Inyan HaMedida, which is also a measure. Remember, this was also a way to measure. So you have two ways of measuring. You have more like one of a tape measure. Think of it like that, like a string, rope. And one that's a more solid measure, it's also medida. Avla medida ubchinas chesed. But this measurement is a level of chesed. So it's a different type of measurement. What does that mean? This measurement is a measurement in the level of oir, of energy and revelation. Until now we were measuring, essentially saying the kelim. That for something to be an identity, how could Chachma become an identity when the Ratzon is in full intensity? How could Midas emerge when wisdom is at full intensity, etc., etc.? So you need Gvura to limit it. Now, but also the energy which is Chesed also needs. Someone has to limit the energy.
It's Gvura acting on Chesed.
Also see, second first he's saying so gam yet bezemedit beefen himshach beeze efen yumshach ha'er. One second. You remember the beginning of the chapter, we talked about the Medida 2 ways. By the teacher, first he has to limit it in himself, and then he has to measure it according to the students. It seems very similar. We'll see. I just reminded me. The two tzimtzumim. 1 second. Okay, we'll see if it's. I think it's relevant. That just was the. So okay, we see going on. So also in the Hamshacha Se'er, Eif be'ez Eif Yum Shacher, because that language was right in the beginning of the chapter. That's why it struck me. Okay. How the energy should flow. However, this form of measurement, this form of measurement is in the level of chesed. Doesn't explain this yet. Doesn't explain. He's just saying that you have another type of measurement which is chesed, not gvura. I don't want to explain it until I finish reading. I want to see where he's going to go. Explain, because now, in the beginning is the measurement in the Hisavus, in the creation, in the formation of the Spheres. So, like we discussed earlier, in order for there to be the creation and emanation of a lower sphere, there has to be a limit and a pausation, a cessation, ceasing to the expansion of the higher sphere. And that happens through the Kav Hamida. We learned that before. Now he's saying, and the second step, afterwards, now that there's been that measure, you've measured and said, okay, the flow is stopping, the expansion of Kesed is stopping, in order to allow Chachma. He says, once you did that, you need another thing. When the lower sphere has already been emanated, he keli the Kabbalah Sa'ed, and it's a container to receive the energy. So you have now a container has allowed to emerge. The container of Chachma has now been allowed to emerge, or the container of Bina, or the container of Midas, whatever. Now comes step 2. Gam bezeh yesh medida. Here too there's a measurement. In what way will the energy and the revelation of the higher sphere transmit into the lower sphere? So now we have a measurement number 2. Not the measuring, not the stopping of the flow in order to allow for the identity of Chokhmah to emerge, but now how much will actually flow in? So now it's almost like, you think of it this way, it's almost like, my visual for it is, I hope I'm correct, is that the first stop is almost like stops the flow altogether, like a dam, that regulates the flow for 30 seconds to allow the next level to emerge. But then after 30 seconds, it opens up a bit to let something in. So you need a second measurement. How much is going to enter from Kesser to Chachma? We only learned that Ratzon has to be slowed down if you want intelligence to emerge, and so on, the other spheres. But how much actually flows from one to the next? So it's not just stopping it. The Gevura part is also, the flow itself is not going to have the whole flow because it will again overwhelm. But you need something entering in. So that's the key to the basic interface of how much you're going to let into Gvul from Bli Gvul. Because if you allow Bli Gvul full intensity, the Gvul will never emerge. Even if you stop the Bli Gvul and the Gvul emerges, you can't just open the floodgates again. So you need to have now a measure of the flow. And that's the Knei Hamida. So Kav Hamida and Knei Hamida. Clear? I think that's what he's saying. I think it's a very clear picture of the two type of valves, so to speak. One is almost stopping, and one is stops, and one regulates flow.
Why would you call it Bli Gvul?
Because in the big picture, I'm right away jumping to the big picture. Right now, Kesser is an example for so-called Bli Gvul. In the big picture, because I'm right away going back to the interface of Ayin Beis. But practically speaking, you're correct. It's Kesser and Chochmah. So forget about Bli Gvul. It's intense desire. But we'll see. You'll see in a moment. He's going to go back to the Ovis. Okay, v'achka kashek kfar netzolos v'etachtena we klei lekabel gam bezeh yesh beiz if yim shachar v'gili masur al yene bas v'etachtena v'ayne sheyeh gili yeser mikfi she niktzav, which means that it should be a greater gili than what was initially, the way it was initially designated. Niktzav means measured. Al pi kav hamida, according to the kav hamida that initially brought it into existence. I would almost say, if you want to take the artist picture, the artist image again, to paintbrush, the stages, right? The first step in a paintbrush is he just makes an outline, let's say. Just key outline. And then you start filling it in with more colors and more personality. So the Kav Hamida is just creating the bare minimum that measures that you should be able to have it on paper. Then comes the development of that, so the Knei Hamida starts flowing in more, and the artist, you'll see, will come back to the picture and start adding more dimensions of his vision to make it come far more alive. It's not just a sketch, it becomes a full-bodied entity. I'm just giving you an example of how it may work. Now, he's adding another point that's key, because the whole thing with Gvura. Remember, the first one is Gvura. The primary force and function is limitation. And that's why, as the spheres go downward, as we learned, the Gvura gets more intense. Clear. This second one is more important, is revelation. Regulated revelation, but revelation. More than what the Gvura allowed for. So this is called Hamtakas HaGvuras. The sweetening of the Gvura. See, the Gvura tells you, stop. At kan. At potovai. Only till here. You can't go further. Chesed opens the door a bit and says, no, well, let's flow in. So what it's doing is sweetening the intensity, or you could say the strictness and the stringency of the Gvura, of the measurement. Okay? It's a very interesting piece. You don't find this often. I just gave you an example. I gave a bunch of examples. That you have something that allows another entity to emerge, and then there's another step where the flow starts. You ever see a dam? A dam stops all the water, but then there's holes in the dam. There's pipes that allow some water through. So one is niktzav, is what the first one did, was measured and stopped. The second one is allowing a flow, so it's more than what was initially allowed. You have to learn the whole chapter. The whole chapter talks about the niktzav. You have to create boundaries. Look, little children, right? They eat far less than we do. They eat slower because their pipes and everything is smaller. Correct? So they have to eat slower, they have to eat less. When you grow a little older, the same pipes grow so you can do more. So Kafisha Niktsuv is like so-called the limit of what's the minimum required in order to allow not to destroy the pipes, so to speak. But as the pipes expand, there's an expanded flow. Like you exercise your muscles. Initially you try to push your muscles further than you could, you're going to get hurt. But if you exercise your muscles, There's a point where you develop them, and there's hamtakas hagvura, meaning a chesed flow begins to be able to flow more energy, can flow into something that initially was constricted.
Let's take for example the creating of a bina. So first you say chokhmah has to get limited in order for bina to emerge.
Correct. And then there starts a flow.
And then what?
A flow, chokhmah starts flowing and forming bina, and bina develops, bina grows.
That shlemus of bina has some kind of a...
It grows. Why not? You teach a child aleph base, and then as the mind grows, if you give him more than aleph base, like the whole chassidus, you start with what you can give somebody, spoon feed them, so they can. If you overwhelm them, the tzimtzum addition. What's the whole point? If you overwhelm them, there would be nothing there. They wouldn't be able to emerge. So first you have a complete concealment. The teacher hides all his ideas and allows the student to find himself. There's a space for the student. A space. As the student now hears, now the teacher can start opening the channels. And the flow begins. And it could be more than what was just initially measured. God created the universe in the beginning with a minimum amount to keep the universe existent. What we're going to learn now is the Ovis and Matan Torah, of course, all bring in new energy that widen the channels. So there's the minimum, like we say Rosh Hashanah. What happens if we do not blow shofar or Chaz v'Shalom or daven Rosh Hashanah? Will the world not be renewed? It will be, but it'll be like a sleep, like a comatose state. Kafisha niktsav. You'll get exactly minimum to keep it alive, like a vegetable. But one would hardly call that a full life. You'd call that, okay, I've got the minimum energy flowing in to keep the machine going. Asleep, comatose. That's kafisha niktsav. That's like what he spoke earlier, what just keeps maintenance of existence. But if you want anything extra, anything more, you need a Knei Hamidah. That's what he's saying here. Chesed. So think Kifisha Niktsav simply being the minimal flow that's necessary to keep it going, to keep it alive or sustain it. Now he says, Va'inyan hu. The inyan of this is Kidisa b'Medrash Rabbah Pasha Emer, like it says in Medrash Rabbah Pasha Emer, Al Posek v'Ol Elokim B'Truah. The God rises Bisruah with a sound, with a call, with a shofar. So what does the Medrash say? What do you mean Ol Elokim? The God rises. So Imid B'Kisei Din v'Yeshiv Al Kisei Rachman. He stands up from the throne of judgment and sits down on the throne of compassion. We learned this Rosh Hashanah. Hainu Shadin Nepach L'Chesed V'Rachamim. What does this mean? It means that when we Elokim B'Sruah, through the Sruah, that we cry out from below, the Din, where he was sitting in judgment, which is far more strict, far more measured, You want to talk about Kfisha Niktsav? Here's another example. Rosh Hashanah, you come Rosh Hashanah, so there's a certain amount that was designated for you for the next year. Parnasa, health, and so on. What are you davening for? I want more than what was given me based on so-called what was allocated. You ask for compassion. You ask for rachim. You say, I want, for whatever reason, I want more. So there's going to be a amount that's niktiv, that's defined, and then we try to expand that. So that's what happens. Elokim B'Truah, transforming din to chesed and rachamim. That's the hamtakas hagvuras that he's talking about in Aved. V'zehu inyan ol Elokim. And that's the meaning of Ola Elokim. Why Elokim? Haliyah the Shem Elokim, which is Gvura. Shenaseh Kimuhu Shem Havaya. Ola Elokim, you want Elokim, the way he's in Din. Din is called Elokim. You want him to go, Elokim B'Sruah, Havaya B'Kel Shefer. What's the second half? Right? Elokim B'Sruah, Havaya B'Kel Shefer. Havaya. So you want Elokim to elevate, to become Kimuhus, like the personality of Shem Havaya, Sha'adeh Hagiluk the Shem Havaya B'Shem Elokim, through the revelation of Havaya, the name of Havaya and the name of Elokim, Nasa Hashem Elokim Kimuhu Shem Havaya. The name of Elokim becomes like the personality of the name of Havaya, which is Rachamim. Right in the beginning, Rashi says, Rashi is Bar Elokim Shema V'Zaz. Right? It said, Ratzah Kadosh Baruch Hu, that He create the world with Midas Adin V'Ra Shein Elam Miskayim. So what does He do? He shittif Him by Midas Rachamim. Had He created the world only with Midas Adin, it would have been the Niktsev, what's measured, it would be too strict. It would be a world that would be too unable to find anything. It would be like too limiting, too much symptom. She gave Midas Rachamim, not that He destroyed the Elokim, God forbid. It still says Bereshis Bar Elokim, but He added into Elokim, He opened the flow. So it's not just the Kav Hamida, the Knei Hamida. So Havaya radiates now in Elokim. Elikim would be, like for example, you decide you're going to hide from your child, or you're going to do some other challenge that your child should bring out the ingenuity of the child to do something. And you do it very strictly. And the child, you see your child starting to cry. Your child sees. Now the purpose of what you're doing is to bring out the best of the child. So if you have a little rachmanis, what happens is you give a hint to the child. You do something extra. You bring in something that's more compassionate. Not that you don't want the child to continue doing the work, but you make it a little easier. You open the door a bit. You don't just completely slam the door and say, get in. There's openings, which is this is basically what he's saying. So, Midas Hadin has its role, but Midas Hadin alone, this Havaya in Elikim, he's not bringing here Shittafim, I'm just using it as an example. What is that in the Sfiris? That there should be the Gili of Arechampin from Keser, the lower part of Keser, Bezah, in the Midas. So Zah here would be, remember we said, where's the primary Gvura? In Zah. So primary Elikim is in Zah. Where is, what did we say about Keser before? Rachmim Shutim. So, all Elikim, the Thruah, from the Kisei of Zah, sitting on the throne of Din, Gvura, where things are very structured and limited, in Zah, you want to bring in Havaya from Keser, so it's Mamshech, so that, till the point that Zah becomes like Arechampin.
It's like an opposite flow. On one hand, we're descending, we're creating forms, and on the other hand, we want the form to...
That's the whole point of the interface, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly the point. The unity of God in existence, absolutely.
So like an entity, and then...
That's the whole point. That Dira b'tachteinim b'laz.
The kleiner ponim are aggressive ponim.
Right. So Zoyrampin means small face, small partsuf, small structure. Arechampin is large structure. So it's the same. But small structure is the definition, the limitation of the structure, the kavamida, the measure. In other words, God wants a structured universe. Structure requires, as we spoke of earlier at length, a keich hagvul, a eir hagvul, to create real definition. And that keich hagvul is functioning, it's a yesh. If you want a yesh, that you and I should feel a separate, unique identities, independent identities, if there was no gvura, there's no way that we could feel that we're independent. Gvura is essentially the power of restraint. It's the power of a parent or a chacham or anyone that allows you to be and doesn't overwhelm you with their full, all so-called omnipresence. Okay? So it's that type of withholding, restraining. But then there's the other side. You want to have the hamshachi. You want to bring in you don't want a world that's just structure. You want now a world that's structured that's going to have oir. This essentially is the story of Eiris and Kalim, Keich HaBligvul and Keich HaGvul, the Eirag Bligvul, Eirag Gvul, and a more microcosm is the Sfiris, Keser, Meichel means I told you, it's all microcosm. That's why I went back to Eirag Bligvul and Gvul. Eirag Gvul, because on the higher level, that's really what it comes down to. Eirag Bligvul is all intensity, Gvul does not emerge. Gvul is all intensity, you don't have a transformation. So the key is how do you keep an independent entity in existence without compromising it and bring in. So that's why now we're going to come. What he's doing and explaining in this chapter is he's broadening the channel. What's happening here is that, remember the question was, doesn't everything go through a channel, even the others? He said yes, but there's another dimension to the channel that we haven't discussed, and that's the chesed of the channel. There's the gvura part of the channel that limits the flow, and the chesed part of the flame that opens the flow. It's really basically a valve. You could almost say the valve when it's closed is gvura, the valve when it's open is chesed. But also measured. It's not.
How much it lets it open.
Right. So it's like the on and off switch, if you want to put it that way. But even on, when you put it on electricity, it's not. It's also regulated. Yeah. So that's why it's a medida. Right. It's kanei, it's still medida.
Beautiful.
Right, that's the point. It's not suddenly you open it up and back to square one and everything's overwhelmed. The rest, what do you got to do? What do you have? It's actually the secret to engineering. When they create engineering, it's always trying to find a circuit to open it enough that it shouldn't destroy what happens when there's a surge.
Godly engineering.
The power surge. That's why you have, what are these called? The strips, electric strips. It's so-called regulating the flow. Whether they do or not, I don't know, but they're supposed to do.
to have an inner fuse, that if it's like a person.
Right. There we go. Very nice. And now he's going. So this is the Hamtakas HaGvuras. It sweetens the measurement, so to speak, the limit. And this measurement, in the way that energy flows, this is Knei Hamida. The stick, the rod that measures. That's already Chsadim. It's interesting, I think you pointed out, it would seem that the string is more flexible than the rod. And the rod is more gevura than the string, but here's the other way around. And as a matter of fact, I'm almost sure this is not the way it's explained in Biyuri Hazer in Alter Rebbe. I think he says the opposite. There he says Knei Hamida is more gevura.
Really?
I think so. But fine, that's so be it. It's not.
As long as you know which system you're thinking of.
Right. I'm almost sure that's the way it explains it. That's why he says it's Necheshes. Because Necheshes, the picture, image of Necheshes is very strong gevura. Copper is intense gevura. I have to look again. But it does. I mean, it's not a contradiction. You have two different.
Usually the word is that color. It's like a reddish.
Here he talks about kona comes from water,
right,
and flax comes from
earth.
So it's like.
Yeah, no. Listen, you have in my modern that an idea can be explained in two ways. It's not the end of the word. But I think the Zohar, I'm almost sure.
Did he contradict the Zohar?
No. He does. No, he brings the Zohar. He doesn't contradict the Zohar. The Zohar itself says that Zimnin sometimes this, sometimes that, but the Zohar doesn't necessarily say which is which. I have to look it up. I don't want to jump. I know for sure the Zohar says B'tzina de Kardanissa, that the Knei Hamida is not the B'tzina de Kardanissa. So clearly B'tzina de Kardanissa is for sure Gevura, because it's was we discussed. So
that's how it is in the Mishnah also.
Yeah. Knei Hamida here is Chesed for sure, and Kav is Gevura. But I don't want to jump to the conclusion. I want to go back to those Maimarim. I need some time to read them. It's a little, it's very dense, a very interesting Maimar. It's in Zohar, Biyuri Hazer, if you want to look it up yourself. Mittler Rebbe and Tzemach Tzedek on Parsha Pekudei talks at length this whole piece of the Kav and Knei Hamida.
Black page with white print on it.
Yeah. So here we go. So B'derech Klal, Zeu HaHefresh ben Hamedida Shem B'chinas Habina LaMedida B'chinas Chochma. Now he's adding something more. And in general, what we just said, Chesed and Gvura, this is the difference between the measurement from the level of Bina, that would be Gvura, LaMedida B'chinas Chochma, to the measurement that's in the level of Chochma, that would be Pashtus Chesed. The Bina, Hu B'chinas Kav Hamida. Yeah. Bina is the level of the line that measures. Commission Bar Le'il, Da Pinchas ben Elazar. As we learned before in the Maimer Pinchas ben Elazar, which is the previous Maimer, I believe. This is Mates. Yeah, Pinchas, yeah. What did we learn there? B'Shem HaMe'er Eir, in the name of the Me'er Eir, another Me'er Papyrus, another Kabbalist. The Ikra Hu B'chinas Gvura. That the primary element of Bina is Gvura.
Where is this Papyrus?
From the students of the Arizal. Students of the students. Me'er Eir. It's like an encyclopedia of Kabbalah. It's an encyclopedia of Kabbalah. It's an Aleph Beis order. Like it'll go through Avram, Eir, whatever. Yeah, but very short, and gives you the Kabbalistic level of each entity. And then there's Yair Nasiv on the side. He gives you the sources. It's a very fundamental book brought in Chassidus. It's a grounder. In Ayin Beis, he keeps referring to it. Every time he talks about a level, always brings what does Me'er Eir say on that level. Like remember Matseva, Malchus, Teferes, whatever.
It's like the Zohar.
Oh, even here, Me'er Eir, right here. I believe in the beginning, right? It is. Where did I see the Me'er Eir? Maybe the last chapter. Yeah. Me'er Eir was the beginning of chapter Kufrun Zayin, about Oisher, what Ashiris is. Yeah, that was what I'm talking about. He brings a lot of Me'er Eir. Okay, so what does the Me'er Eir say? That Bina is primarily Gvura. Hey, Gvura is the Ima. And these are called the 5 Gvuras of Bina, of Ima. Umekabelas M'chinas Gvura da'atik. And it receives from Gvura da'atik. She'll say, hey, we just learned that Kesed is Zachmim Pshutim.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's a Kesed we're talking about. You mentioned this. You got it.
Yeah. I don't know. Less Mele B'Hayatik also we say. But there's Gvura Da'atik. It's not a contradiction. There are places that say there's Gvura Da'atik. Shemalubish b'Meichus Tema. That manifests in Meichus Tema in the unconscious wisdom. V'Knei Amidah B'Chinas Chachma. He's just technically giving us the levels. So don't let it throw you. He's just giving us the levels that Chachma and Bina is the root of it. And Knei Amidah B'Chinas Chachma, the Ikra B'Chinas Chasadim. Because the Ikra of Chachma, the primary force in Chachma is Chasadim, kindness, love. And that receives from Chesed of Atik, as opposed to Kavamid Bina that receives Gvura Atik. And where is that Mislabish? In the Galgalta, in the skull.
Which is funny, it's the opposite, right? Chachmas B'Nemi, and the Galgalta is Makif, and Mavstimo is Chachma.
No.
That's what he says.
He just said it's Gevura.
Yeah, Meichus Tema. He's saying, is it Meichus Tema, the source of Chachma?
Right.
But he didn't call it Chachmas Tema, he called it Meichus Tema. Meichen is Meichen, Chachma and Bina.
Okay.
So, Chachmas Tema, you're right. But Meichus Tema is more general Meichen, so he's talking there, the Bina part of it.
Wow, so there is a difference when you talk like that. We throw them both around together all the time.
Yeah, he didn't break it down here either. I'm just pointing it out. And Chachma and Bina, remember, Chachma is on the right, Chesed sits under Chachma, and Bina is on the left. So what is it in the mind? The right brain and the left brain. And where is it rooted in Atik? The right and left of Atik. Chesed of Atik. In Galgalta, in the skull, Chachma. The left side of Atik, Gvura of Atik, goes in Meichus Tema, which is Pashtus Binas Tema.
Which is a Keli.
And that goes into Bina. That's what he says. He's not explaining. It's purely says the level here. I don't want to go into explanation because it's just technical. But it's important because for the picture he wants to just finish.
Malkum is basically a Keli anyway. So it's Malkum
depends. Well, Chachma is more of Oyer.
Right.
Chachma generally is more Oyer and Bina is more Keli. We learned this. That's where Chachma is the intensity. It's an akuda. It's more energy than Keli. Bina is more Keli than Oyer. That's why he breaks it into details. What is that? That's usually Chesed and Gvura. Chesed is more Eir, Gvura is more Keli. In the Sheirish, in Atik, it's Chesed and Gvura of Atik, basically. And in the Galgalta, the skull is more, I guess, is the whole skull. The skull you could also say is a Keli, but in this case it's not. The Galgalta seems to be more of an Eir, expanded Eir. And the Meichus Tema seems to be more the constricted. Because Galgalta often refers to like the white light. It's like the whole skull. It's like considered a high level.
Under the skull, like the floor, the meninges.
Yeah, probably right. And then unconscious intelligence here seems to be the more the Bina, because it's focusing on intelligence as opposed to pleasure. Probably I'm not, because Meichus Tema compared to Atik is a constricted. But Chachma, remember, is Primis Chachma, Primis Abba, Primis Atik. Chachma fundamentally is intent. Remember, it's Riyah. It's seeing, it's conviction, it's resonance. Bina is an understander. So Meichus Tema here is definitely clearly the beginning of understanding, comprehending. That's what it looks like. To explain it. Now, interesting, the parentheses now. Why is it a parenthesis? And now he's going back to answer. And this is the difference between the measurement of creation of the world to the measurement that was in the transmission of the patriarchs, of the Avos. To create the world, the medida, the measurement that created existence, that's the kavamida. That's a kafisha niktzav. That's measured. It's a limited flow that creates. But we said it doesn't elevate the world. All it does is create the world. And what the Ovis, the Abshachah, they poured into the pipes, remember? They go back to the source from Arich. They're pouring into the pipe something that's more than just the minimal to keep it afloat in a like comatose state. That's the Medida from Knei Hamida. The measurement that comes from how much Eir should go in. And they brought in Eir. That's what it says. Avram brought Eir into the world. Before that you have pipes. For good or for bad. And we spoke, they got corroded. They can get damaged. They got corrupted. The others bring this in. And obviously Matan Torah is going to bring in something completely new. We finally finished chapter 158. But the kitzur is almost as long as the chapter. So we'll do the kitzur. Okay, so he answered the question essentially. That question was that yes, to say that so we could say correctly, the Ovis and Matan Torah bring Shaloi al pi maimer kav hamida. But that doesn't mean it brings from outside of the kav hamida of mida. It just brings al pi knei hamida. That's the key verse here. So still going through the pipes, but it's the knei hamida now, the valve. That's the answer to the question. So
Knei Hamida is a stick. It's like a plunger. You're using it, to plunge things down.
Yeah. Look, technically speaking, also kav hamida, a rope or a string. You can explain it a different way. Also, the kav hamida string, when you measure something with a string, it's usually far more fragile and limited. You're just getting essentially a stick is going to be definitely a far more substantial entity. When they measured for the Beis Hamikdash, so you have to measure things like earth or porous materials is one thing, but you want to measure the stones and the magnitude of it.
Clearly over here, he's not talking about the technique of the measures, he's saying what the source of the...
Right. So in the beginning of the chapter, which was interesting, which is why I referred back to it, he did say that in Medida there's two things, and I think these are the two things. I think it's very consistent. One is that the teacher has to limit the flow within himself, and he said that was the Ovis. And then he has to consider what the students are. So you could say those are the two things. To considering what the students are, that's the Gvura. The only thing, the order there is the opposite. That's the only thing that bothers me. Here the order is first comes the Gvura, then comes the Chesed. There, first comes the Chesed, then the Gvura. But it's a similar idea, that the teacher has to limit the flow and determine how the flow should go. And the second is how the Mekablim will receive it. I'm not saying it's exactly, I just wanted to point that out. Let's do the kitzur.
He said also that the Avos said the Or is Atzmi.
He says it in parentheses, that the Avos brought down Eres Atzmim, Esesphiris, in Atzmas HaMashpiyah. Right, so it's like really more the Oyer, not so much the Mekablim. So it sounds like a little like that. Anyway, it's not a contradiction because it depends whether you go a mile, to create, you need first the Gvura, the limit, and then you need the flow. But when a teacher transmits, first he needs to limit the flow within himself, and then he, from the perspective of the teacher, Chesed comes first, then Gvura, in a way. Or, from the perspective of the student, Gvura comes first, then Chesed. First there's the limit, and then the flow. From the teacher, first there's first allowing his idea to be measured, and then he limits it. But it's probably Gvura, Chesed, Gvura, it's all complicated all the ways. You can explain it so many ways. Kitzur. We have to understand, how could we say that the Ovis brings Shaloi al pi maimer kav hamida, meaning not according to the kav hamida, the line that measures. Haloi, isn't it that all revelations, even Er Makif, even transcendent energy, is according to the kav hamida? All according to that first, pipeline. And surely imminent energy, sheyesh medida be'efen agili, which has a measurement in how it's revealed. Shazo be'etzem atzilus adayin. The two things. That's how it's in the core atzilus still. There's a measurement, and also eich sheyiskabel be'elemis, and also a measurement how it should be received in the world. So the answer is, chine, however, yesh kav hamida v'knei hamida. There's levels there's a kav hamida, the line, and there's the rod. Psil uknei, ukana. Psil ukana. Psil is the thread, and the rod. Kav hamida hu gvura limdei tzvira sheyuchel yisas tzvira shacharel. Kav hamida is the line that measures, is the gvura, the restraint that measures spheres, that they should be able to be a sphere that comes lower, below it. The next sphere should be able to emerge. The betekiv is galas hadatz and iyav shali yaseichel. The intensity, revelation of the intensity of desire and will, there can't be seichel, intelligence. Ubaveda, we learned, usid liba l'mayla mahaseichel. Rusa Deliba is fundamentally the desire of the heart to connect to God, is higher than intelligence. Gam Shabai de Hizbonus Va'afla. Also, the Rusa Deliba that comes, like you said, through contemplation of the grand door. This comes from the Hergish of Ein Sof. It doesn't come from Seichel. It comes from the sensation, sensing the divine, infinite. Because the Ratzon, the core desire, is revealed. The catalyst, perhaps, was the intelligence, but it's not intelligence. Never the Hergish Sichli. And once the desire is awakened and excited, you lose that Hergish Sichli, the sensation, the sense that came from intelligence. And we learned there was the highest level, someone who has actually a comprehension in the way that God is beyond the grandeur, appreciates that grandeur. That's already Ava B'Tainugim, that's love out of pleasure, that has Seichel in it too, as we learned. But you see, it's a parenthesis, it's an exception, it's not the primary focus he wants to say.
But it was just in a Tanya 2 days ago, exactly, the whole thing.
Now he moves further down. And the desire to conceive is the source of wisdom. And this too, wisdom can only emerge
if the
Ratzon is not in full intensity. Because if desire is what's driving him, he won't have the patience and the restraint to conceive. Same thing with Chachma Bina. Core Chachma wisdom is the vision, is the resonating truth, which is that this is higher than comprehension. From this will come profound comprehensions in Bina, but only after the concealment of this resonating truth, the truth. And also intelligent conviction is higher than comprehension. Well, because he said like this, Rak only with his gabas hasichli ala nocha. For it to come into comprehension, you have to have the intelligence has to overwhelm, dominate, overpower the conviction. For it to come into intelligence, he said that clearly also. Yeah. So it has to be a salmus, and only when the sichli overpowers the conviction. Then goes next level. V'chein la'achri salmus hameichin in galus hamidus. And same thing, the next levels of spheres. Only after the concealment of intelligence comes the revelation of the emotions. And the example of all of this in the 10 spheres is the measurement of Kavamida. And that's why the more it devolves, the more revealed is the level of Din and Gvura, the measurement, discernment, justice, discretion, governance, the governance of the rule and order. However, by contrast, Knei Hamida, which is the rod of measurement, that's Chsadim. This is the measurement of the energy flow. That's just in order to cause the sweetness of the Gvura. Like we say, Elakim should elevate. That's the transmission of Arechampin into Zah. And in general, this is the difference between the measurement of Bina and the measurement of Chachma. The Chachma receives some chesed of Atikim. Okay, I believe we'll stop here. So we ended chapter 158, the end of the bottom of page 315 to the end of page 316, the end of chapter 158 in volume 1 of Ayin Beis.